Good afternoon and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie, and with me, as always, is Sanchez and Nida Wood. How are you guys doing?
Already. Let's see how it is. It's been a minute.
We've fallen down on the podcast train a little bit last couple of months, so we'll have to get back on it. And trust me, it's not because we didn't want to do these podcasts. It's been incredibly busy, so. But what we wanted to do is get on here, talk a little bit about what's going on in the news, latest celebrity divorce stuff, which I think we got enough for a whole episode on just Kim and Kanye. But we also wanted to talk a little bit about, divorce issues going into the new year, modification issues, divorce, because a lot of people wait till after the holidays to file for a divorce or file for a modification. And we want to talk a little bit about how that looks. So did I miss anything?
You got it.
Yep,
okay,
got it.
so let's talk a little bit about Kim and Kanye. So if I don't know, you been paying attention to the news, Sam?
Occasionally I'll turn it on.
So Kanye, or Ye, as he's calling himself these days, is making the rounds. He's been not working well and playing well with others. I think he's got a lot of comments, made a lot of comments, has been dropped by basically, I think, everybody that either represented him or he did business with, or he sold products for, or he designed products for, including Adidas, Balenciaga, I think might have been one, his manager, his company, I can't even think who else. So I guess the question is, I know there was some ramblings because Kim and Kanye, I guess they filed their divorce not too long ago, maybe October.
Like a month before that. It's been like a month.
Yeah. Is the ex acting, completely off the rails? Obviously the comments are pretty bad, anti-Semitic, things like that. I mean, to put it mildly. So is a parent acting out like that? Is that grounds for a modification? At least in Texas, I don't know. I don't know that it is. I'm not taking Kanye's side or anything like that, but he's making comments before the divorce. He's making comments after the divorce. Does it make him an unfit parent?
Well, I would tell you, I think one of the things you have to remember in Texas is that when you finalize a divorce, it locks in a lot of things for a set period of time, typically, and modification.
You're talking about the 1 year,
Correct.
1 year to modify anything with and in the absence of an emergency, I guess.
Absolutely. And so same thing in Florida. So you're talking about, anytime you finalize something, the courts very rarely want to see repeat litigation. They want you to go away for a while. They want you to have made the right decisions or gotten the right decisions from a court in relation to order and how it relates to you as a parent and your children, and not come back. So typically that threshold to get back into court is high. It's not something that's just, bad behavior, like he's a jerk, is going to be enough. But there's no set rule. There's no set order that the judge is like, hey, if you do any of these things, you're automatically going to get in and it's going to justify a modification in under a year. And so
let me ask you this. So like the hypothetical would be like, take your worst possible clan member, like the red dragon or black dragon or green, whatever the leader of the clan is, the worst racist you can think of. Take him.
Grand Wizard. The
Grand Wizard. Okay, take the Grand Wizard. Is he gonna be subject to a let's say he's the Grand Wizard over here, but a good dad over here. In this hypothetical. I mean, I don't know how that wouldn't bleed over, but that's neither here nor there. So suppose he's got this violent racist thing going on over here, but over here on the other side, there's really nothing that's ever happened with the kids. That grounds for a modification.
Possibly. It depends on your court. We've talked a lot about in the past, we've all said, hey, you got to know your audience. I think it's really important to know a judge and their predispositions. Unfortunately, in Texas, we elect our judges, so they change pretty regularly sometimes. And it's tough to know. I would tell you that I think you have a good argument to make. As a parent, the things that concern you as a good parent concern judges, because judges, in my opinion, are always going to take the path of least resistance, and they're extremely cautious. The last thing they want to do is be on the news explaining why they did something stupid in relation to a child's safety, welfare, or well-being. So it really needs to revolve around those types of things. So if he's the Grand Wizard And in the Grand Wizard, they're doing some pretty terrible things, like let's say dragging people from behind their truck with, tow chains.
Right.
That's
That's a criminal
probably
act.
enough.
Right.
Yeah, but if they're just getting together and smoking cigars and having beers and talking about how they don't like a particular race, that may not be enough. So it's really going to be what they've done
So
and
you can
how
be
it
an
can
asshole.
potentially
So
affect the
you can be
child.
an asshole. You just can't do anything illegal
Well, I
a
mean, it's
kid's in
how it
danger.
affects the child. If they're taking the kid to the meetings, you probably have a pretty good argument. You have a pretty good
That's
argument to go
fair.
in there and say, hey, this is detrimental to their emotional or, their development as a child. They don't need to be exposed to that. Whether you believe it or not, whether you're entitled to that belief or not, has no relevance in a courtroom. The courtroom,
So
when you talk
take a
about law, it's
public
about the
figure
kids.
like Kanye, he says something, it's going to be reported by 24 newspapers, internet outlets, who you name it. He says, they're they're writing stories about what time he ties his shoes. I mean, everything he says, I'm sure some of it is probably for shock value. I'm sure some of it. I mean, obviously, from what I've read, obviously there's some mental health conditions in there, and he may be off his medication and spiraling downward. Um, I can't make sense of it because, at one point, way back, you sounded, somewhat reasonable, and you're like, okay, and then it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and now you're like, who the hell is this guy? He's wearing a black mask and appearing on the Alex Jones show of any like crazy loon website that he can get onto. I mean, I don't get it,
And
but
well, I
I
think a lot
also
of it,
don't get crazy.
yeah. Well, what are you exposing your kids to? How old are your kids? What are they able to read? Do they have exposure to social media? Do they have access to his account to be able to see some of the stuff that he's posting? That's all part of it. And then you're also talking about, is this all his behavior? Is it tied into his mental health? Is he getting help for it or not? And if he's not, then that's, I think, a bigger issue. And then, of course, I know in Texas, you're talking about modifying many different types of things. So it's not necessarily custody, it might be decision-making abilities for the kid. So is his demeanor and the way he's acting and the way he's portraying himself, is that affecting his ability to make decisions for the kids? And if so, then that might be grounds to modify some of those decision-making abilities for sure.
I mean, it's a tough call for a judge because you got to balance, you know, the constitutional right of being able to raise your child the way that you see fit. If you want to raise your child with unconventional beliefs, then by all means you have the right to do that. Um, you know, that is what it is. But you know, is that enough? Like you said, if he's just getting around with his buddies and smoking cigars and talking a bunch of crap, I mean, that could be one thing. But is he having the Ku Klux Klan meeting at his house? That's another.
Well, and the bigger piece of that too,
Not that Kanye's in the Klan. I'm just saying that you get the example.
It could be based on his
I'm trying to think of the most egregious examples, but I mean, let's take it back a little bit. Let's say somebody who has just a little bit of outlandish beliefs, but not maybe they're one of those, like, I don't know, flat earth types or some kind of weird thing. Maybe they're in a cult, but they're not really hurting anybody.
Yeah, I mean, all those things are really important, but I mean, like, to your point, what is it? There's no clear-cut, bright line rule as to any court, what they're going to look at. And that's the complexity of coming back in to modify. You always want to give people good advice and tell them, like, hey, this is absolutely going to get you there, but you really don't know. And even sometimes when you get in there, judges kind of look at stuff and they're like, hey, I'm dealing with people who are like burning their kids with, curling irons and stuff. This is not going to rise to the level that it doesn't mean that you can use this, in the multitude of things this person does over the course of time and come back in and modify. Sure. But it doesn't meet that exigent circumstance of having to come in before that year to get that done.
I mean, Sam,
Maybe
you've had cases where the person on the other side was just a little bit crazy, like the one who didn't believe in any medication, and that was a change in decision making type of case, because didn't believe in doctors, didn't believe in medication, that kind of thing.
I'll give you a simple one. We had a case where a client is like, hey, I don't think school's that important. I'm a self-made man. I went out and, I didn't graduate from high school. And so I don't care if my kid goes to school or not. If they want to go, great. If they don't, what's the big deal? And mom's on the other side saying, like, that's a bunch of BS. They have to go to school. Now, obviously, there's a law in Texas that says they have to attend, right? But when dad's sitting out there saying, well, I'm going to let him drop out and he can do his GED online. And mom's like, hell no. Is that enough? Is that enough to get back in front of a court and say, yeah, this is exigent? And that was, it was a kind of a toss up. It ended up going where the judge thought, yeah, absolutely. Anything that's going to affect the long-term future goals of this child is relevant and absolutely exigent. We're going to deal with it. But the thing about that too, and what I would, with Kanye, it's kind of an interesting mix with him and Kim, because I think the reason Kim hasn't gone back to court, I'm not in California, right? We're not licensed in California, but I really feel that it has to do with the financial piece of Kanye, because he took a huge financial hit, and that's another thing that you can come in and modify, right? Hey, you know what? Something drastic happened, and I need to come back in and I need some relief from this.
I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars this guy's dropped.
Yeah. And so when you look at that, obviously, I mean, that's the thing. You open Pandora's box on one side, it's not closed on the other side. You open Pandora's box and everything is open for reexamination. Typically, especially if you're on the other side saying there's a real reason for us to really kind of look at the whole picture. And so I really feel like with Kim and Kanye, it's kind of one of those things where she's like, I really don't want to have to mess with them, and it's crazy because it's just going to get crazier if I antagonize him. But on top of that, the financial picture that we had locked in when he was at the top of this, apex kind of predator list of making money, now that he's not, what does that look like? And do I want to even touch that? I don't think she's really wanting to open that box.
Plus, I mean, it's the whole thing where and I didn't mean to cut you off, Nida, but if you go to court with the crazy person, I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, you don't know when it's going to end or what you're going to get,
Well, Kim's a lawyer now, so she can self-represent, right? Or something like that. And she,
you know what they say about self-representing? You got a fool for a client.
That's true. Yeah, no, it's an interesting, and I would just, it's the end of the year, we're coming through the holidays, and one of those things, this is kind of like the tip of the iceberg moments that we have along the lines for a lot of clients. Typically you go through this gauntlet of holidays and you come out the other end and you're like, God, it was terrible, or this happened or that happened, and I really want to go back to court and I want to change things. And, so we'll see a flood of litigation or litigants come in, prospective clients who say, hey, we really want to get into court as quickly as we can. And those dockets are still backed up from COVID. They're still backed up. And so you bring in new clients who are like, we really want to get in as quickly as we can. We'll just understand, it's going to take some time to do that. And you really have to make sure that you have facts that warrant those, and if you don't, that you build your case before you run to the courthouse and file prematurely. And that would be one of the things that I think, people really have to know as they listen to this, is that, sometimes it's really important that you take the time to gather the amount of ammunition you're going to need to really sustain yourself through a battle. Because if you come in on a single instance, it may not be enough. And then guess what? If you just waited a little bit more, that person was going to continue to spiral down that road. But if you come in immediately and then you're like, hey, I want to address it, it's not enough. And that person is going to course correct, and you've kind of missed your opportunity. So, it's a little bit of strategy. And when you talk to your lawyers, they're going to tell you, hey, yeah, I'll get you in right away. Or they'll tell you, let's wait and kind of put it all together. But you're coming to that season, the conclusion of the holiday season, and the entry of, hey, let's go to court and tee it up.
You just have to remember,
kind of like a mini post-COVID, when people were cooped up in the same house together, and we had people wanting to get divorced, kids wanting to modify based on parental preference and all that. But yes, I mean, that's another reason why you shouldn't jump to the court maybe right after the year-long waiting period per se for a modification. It's usually better, not all the time, but maybe waiting a bit longer, like you said, to make a journal, documenting, doing whatever you need to do to make sure you have all your facts together.
And no one ever remembers this, that when you open the modification box, it's Pandora's box. So let's say you like eight things out of your decree and you hate 2 of them. What if the other party doesn't like 6 things and wants to change 4 that you like? Then you've got 4 or 5 things that are on the docket all of a sudden to be changed that you didn't want changed. You wanted the 2 that you really hated. And it's not just a zero-sum game. It's that order after 1 year's can be reevaluated in all aspects, support, custody, all of it. So like you said, with the financial piece, if Kanye's taken a complete bath on all of his I guess his money-making enterprises, and he's broke now, that's grounds to modify, a lot of different things. I mean, granted, it's self-inflicted, wounds, but at the same time, the income's the income,
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, if you, let's say you hated the visitation order, but you liked the child support, and he wasn't going to go back to court on you because he didn't want to bear the expense, but hey, you filed a modification on him, so heck, I might as well try to get my child support reduced because I'm not making as much money as I was or whatever, and there you go, and then you've got unintended. I guess it's the law of unintended consequences, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's those are the things that a lot of times people just don't really think through, or their lawyer doesn't really help them kind of anticipate that possibility to make an educated decision before you jump into the courtroom. Sometimes it's not always best. A lot of times you can make the changes that you want if you have a party on the other side that's potentially agreeable without ever having to go to court. So maybe it's, something that like you attend mediation, right? Mediation is a great tool for clients to be able to get in, reach some different, changes. Maybe instead of 6 that the person wants, you're changing 3, and the 2 that you wanted, you're changing 1. But everybody's nice and happy when you get out of there because it didn't go in front of a judge who could change it all. So these are the, you just got to kind of really talk to your lawyer, spend some energy and time really formulating a plan, have a litigation strategy. If they haven't told you what their litigation strategy is, by God, ask them what it is, and then help them develop one, because that's what's really going to help you be successful outside of the courtroom, but especially inside the courtroom when you get there.
Well, let's talk one thing about the person who we see this person every year. I just got to get through the holidays and I'm filing a divorce. New year, new me, right? I'm getting out of this thing. That's another one that I would encourage someone to take a long, hard look at. Yeah, being cooped up, like you said, Nida, with the mini COVID, for the holidays in your house with this person and the kids is probably taxing and stressful on everybody, including you, including them. But yeah, before you jump off the ledge and go filing for divorce, make sure it's absolutely something that you want to do, and it's absolutely something that you're prepared to go all the way with, because a whole bunch of things start happening when you file for a divorce that could be unintended, could be intended, could be unintended. And it's worth talking to a lawyer about, to say, hey, 30 days after we file for this divorce, or they file an answer, we're going to have to, cough up 2 years worth of tax returns and, pay stubs and financial statements and all kinds of stuff. I mean, all this stuff, you better be ready to be under the microscope for at least 6 months.
That's right. And that litigation strategy that we just mentioned, I mean, it's applicable all across the board, right? You're a good lawyer, like, that's one of the first things we do. We sit down with our clients and really kind of formulate that strategy. What are your really goals and objectives? How are you wanting to get from point A to point B? And then here's all the pitfalls that we see, because I would love to tell you that, everybody who comes in that we represent is unblemished. They're like white as, white, pure, wedding dress clean. This is not that way. And so you really have to take a hard look at the mirror, and a good lawyer will help you with that. They'll tell you, hey, here's all the warts that I see on our side, and we really need to be careful of this. Here's how we try to eliminate or, minimize the potential damage that can come from what exists. Because, all lawyers will, at least smart lawyers will tell you, we didn't create the facts. We're just going to help you deal with them. And, a good plan will help you with that, especially as we're kind of rounding this corner and getting ourselves in gear, whether it's, I want to file a modification, I want to file for divorce, I need to address particular issues, specific issues with my kid, or whatever it may be in enforcement. There's just a litany of things, but that's for sure one of them.
All right. Well, I think that, Nida, do you have anything else?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it all.
All right. Well, I'll wrap it up for today. I don't want to, I'll tease the future episodes, but I think the next episode, we're going to talk about I read some articles and saw a documentary recently on the $50 billion a year divorce industry. So we'll talk about the, I guess, for lack of a better word, divorce industrial complex next episode. And we can talk through that, kind of how that documentary frames divorce, how divorce is framed, and the pitfalls of that, and the negatives and positives and things like that come along with this $50 billion a year divorce industry, which I off the top of my head, that may be a little bit low compared to what some of these people are spending, and how many people get divorced on a given year. So we'll talk about that next time. But I thank you guys for your time today, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for getting on during the holidays, and I wish you all the best for a Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, guys.
Here.
Take care.